Hello and welcome to End of the Line, which I am running for the Gauntlet online community. I'm Stephen Desjardins, he, him pronouns, and this is a game by April Kit Walsh about the crew of a sentient spaceship on its way to the scrapyard. In this particular session, one of the pictures included in the game for inspiration is an old-fashioned sailing ship suspended from a giant gas bag, so I've chosen to interpret it as a fantasy reskin for this session, an enchanted sentient ship on its way to the scrapyard. If we could go around the table, I think in character keeper order, and just have each of the players introduce themselves.
Sure. As far as I can tell, I'm first on the character keeper. So, hi everyone. My name is David. Happy to be here.
Stephen, you already kind of introduced yourself.
Yes, I
I'll
already
jump you.
Yeah.
No big deal.
Right.
I'm Greg. Most everywhere I go by group soliloquy online, and I'm super excited to play. He, him pronouns. Sorry.
Hello, I am Ferret, also known as Sawyer. I'll answer to either. Gender-wise, I am void of gender. As long as you say a pronoun with respect, I will answer to it.
That probably leaves me. I'm Pearl. I use she and her pronouns. I'm a little kerfuffled at the moment, but happy to be here and to see lovely people for gaming, playings, and such.
All right, and if you will all look at the Players tab on the Character Keeper I sent you, and for the Queen style games, the players read the rules out loud. They're printed on physical cards. I've adapted it to the Character Keeper, and just so I am going to have you read in character keeper order. I will occasionally interject with adaptations for online play, so I will be skipping over myself in the character keeper reading the rules. I will be making interjections as the facilitator. So starting with David.
Okay, so starting here under card text number 1, is it instruction text 0?
Yes.
Got it. All right. It says here that during play, you will read a question card on your turn.
There you go. Take a drink. Okay. You are the crew of a sentient vessel on the way to being scrapped. All other elements of the story are yours to define.
Okay, for this session, I've chosen an image of a sailing vessel suspended from an enormous gas bag, as I said earlier, and we're going to interpret this as a fantasy reskin.
Interpret and answer each question however you like. Others may ask you questions, but it is up to you whether to answer.
Instead of answering the question on your card, you may pass it to the next player and ask them to answer it.
They may answer it or pass it to the next player. If they answer it, the next player then takes their turn.
In general, when somebody passes a question, I'm going to go back to them for the next question, which is a slight modification from the usual way that we play this, but I think it works a little bit better. And if a player passes 2 questions in a row, then I'll move on to the next player and get to them on the next round. And for the safety tools in this game, we're going to be using lines and veils, the X card, and the open table policy, which I think everybody here is familiar with those. Lines and veils are subjects that we don't touch, or that we touch but not in any great detail. The X card is a way to veto subjects that are disturbing or just make the game less enjoyable. And the open table policy is that anybody can leave the game at any point for any reason. The player is more important in the game. And in this game in particular, it's particularly easy for a player to leave without disrupting anything.
And you want me to read this one?
Sure. I mean, this
Okay.
is the card,
Good.
sort of almost as written.
No problem. This is the X card. We'll invoke the X card by saying, hey, I'm going to X card that. Typing X card into the chat, which is down here on Zoom. Or by crossing our arms, as I just displayed in the wrestling move, to form an X.
At any point, a player may invoke the X card to remove unwanted elements, such as problematic answers or redundant questions.
Sorry, mute buttons are not my friend. And also, I was looking at the safety tab and got confused. If a question card is X'd on your turn, discard it and draw the next card. If your answer is X'd, provide a new answer.
There are 2 end cards in the game. When an end card is drawn, take turns answering it. If your answers are in conflict, the game ends.
Oh, shoot. Sorry. I forget that we're skipping Stephen. Okay. If you all agree, you may continue until you reach the other end card.
I'm planning to shuffle the end cards into the deck around the 2-hour, 10-minute mark. And if the card doesn't come up before then, I'll draw the first one around 2:35. If that doesn't end the game, I'll draw the second end card after we answer 1 or 2 more questions. I'm going to try to finish by the 3-hour mark because that is what we scheduled, and I want to respect the schedule.
During play, remember to let the current player answer before asking questions. Offer suggestions only if it is welcome, or else.
That's it. After taking a moment to review lines and veils, we'll begin the game.
All right, so if everybody can take a look at the safety tab and type OK in the chat when you've finished marking your lines and veils. We'll go over the lines and veils, and then I will draw the first question card. Okay, it looks like everybody has typed OK into the chat. So it looks like we have lines on harm to animals, harm to children, parental suffering, death, or peril, sexual assault, slavery, torture, extended isolation, virus/pandemic, extended paralysis of major characters. And we have veils on eye injuries, graphic gore, homophobia, heart attacks or strokes, and acute sad grief. We have ask first, which is you can introduce these things, but you should ask before introducing them, and just make sure that what you're thinking about doing is okay with everybody before proceeding. So we have ask first on bullying, childhood abandonment, and starvation. David, are you okay with answering the first question? I mean, I'm planning to go in character keeper order, but we can start at some other point if you would rather. I don't want to force you into answering the first question just because you took the first column.
I can take a crack at it. I haven't played the game before, so there might be a lot of like asking qualifiers, like if I'm doing this right, but I will go ahead and take a crack at it if you like.
Asking qualifiers means you're doing it right.
Right. Yeah. And just to make it clear, this is a completely free-form game. When you answer a question that that becomes canon. So we sort of expect you to introduce elements about the world and the situation of the ship and its crew in your answers, and to build on what other people have said, and to establish facts about the other players sometimes, which they can X card them if you do anything too extreme, but that's part of the fun of the game, is just people making up stuff and building on what other people have said.
Got it. Well, it sounds hard to mess up, so we'll take a shot at it.
Okay, so I dealt out the card on the Players tab. If you take a look at that.
There we go. Okay. So question number 1 here is, what is a function that others could perform, but the ship asks you to do? So let's see here. To start off with, is the assumption that we're all crew members on this ship?
Yes, that is a default assumption of the game, is that we are all crew on the ship. And there's a space on the character keeper for you to put your character name. You don't have to do that now. You can do it later. You can do it not. You can do it not at all. It's something when it feels like when it feels like the character is defined to you and you want to give them a name, give them a name. And if you never give them a name, that's fine. That's fine too. And there's also space. There's also space in the cells between the questions and the character names and so forth, where you can type notes if there's anything you want to keep track of.
Got it. All right. So my answer is going to be that anyone could, in theory, drive this ship. It's a sentient ship. It can drive itself, but it enjoys having the conversation with the driver, however that's interpreted. And even though anybody could tell this ship where to go or where to point itself, for whatever reason, I'll say that my character is the one who really makes the best conversation with the ship. And so for that reason, it always seems to ask me to drive it, and that's how I ended up becoming friends with it, we'll say.
I have a question.
Oh, go ahead, Greg.
So what happens when someone else tries to drive the ship? What does the ship say to them?
I guess that depends on the ship's mood.
Mm.
Yeah, I like to imagine that the ship is very human-like, like in a weirdly easy to get attached to it kind of way. I can see it being like willing to be driven by other people, but only in the way that like a dog is maybe willing to be walked by people that aren't its owner, but it's not the same, you know?
Now I know that the steering wheel, it's possible to override the ship's free will. Have you ever done that? Force the ship to go where it didn't want to go, or was maybe afraid to go in an emergency?
Oh my gosh, lots of times. Yeah, because we've gotten ourselves into no shortage of problem situations over the years, and the ship hates it, but sometimes I've just had to say, look, this is what we're doing. And so in those kinds of emergency situations, we have to, you know, take off in the direction that whoever is driving it decides to go, and then we just have to make up her feelings later.
If you're having a conversation with the ship while you drive it, can others overhear that conversation? Or is that some link that others can't overhear? Is that a conversation that happens sort of like within a mind voice, or is that like an audio, something that others could overhear?
I think that it's something that other people can overhear, and that's tough because I imagine that my character has this particular bond with the ship that lends a certain amount of trust to the relationship, and so I've probably been overheard telling the ship stuff that I ain't really happy that other people overheard, you know? I could see that happening. So just to clarify, is this basically the flow that the game is supposed to look
Yes.
like? It's okay.
Yes.
Just making sure.
Yes. You answer a question, and then the rest of the players ask follow-up questions, which further define the situation, the world details, and things about your character.
Okay,
This is
got it.
exactly how the game is supposed to go.
Perfect.
Are there any more follow-up questions, or do we move on to the next player? So it sounds like we're ready for the next player, which is, in fact, me. Your society values you less than others. Why? How does this ship make you question this judgment? Well, I am basically I am a golem. I am an animated statue, basically, and I am sentient. I have free will. I am not bound to any master, but people tend to assume that I'm a servant. That I should be subservient to whoever orders me around. It's like if you don't have one owner, then everybody is your owner, and just the ship doesn't have that assumption. The ship treats me like any other member of the crew, and just and just seeing how people treat the ship, it's like a mirror of how they treat me, and I realize, hey, this is not right. And I've become much more assertive since joining the crew of the Phoenix.
Now, I mean this in the best possible way, but more of were you the first of us on the ship? But did you come with the ship?
Oh no, I joined. I mean, the ship had been flying for several years before I was recruited to the crew. In fact, they had just paid off the ship's debt, and the ship had become a free entity, and began recruiting its own crew. So I was one of the first crew members on the ship as an independent entity, but there are others who have been on the ship longer than me.
You said that the ship treats you differently and that it appreciates you more. How does it show that appreciation?
Well, it doesn't treat me differently from how it treats the other crew members. It treats me differently from how the other crew members treat me. Yeah, I mean, the other crew members they tend to be less courteous, less considerate. It's like nobody likes cleaning the trains, but everybody else assumes, oh, we'll just get the golem to do it. The golem can't smell, and that's not even true. I can smell. The others, they don't even ask whether I find tasks to be unpleasant, because it never occurs to them. And the ship understands that I have feelings. It's like we talk about music. We both like music. I mean, I think half the crew doesn't realize that the ship enjoys music, and like we often have concerts and dances on board the ship. A lot of the newer crew, they don't realize that the ship started that we do this on the ship because the ship wants to listen, and because the ship enjoys watching the dancing. Most ships, the crew will go into a village or into the city and get their entertainment there.
What kind of music does the ship like?
Ship tends to like dance music, actually. I mean, I think the ship likes the dancing even more than it likes the music, but it likes stuff that's got a really strong beat. I mean, I tend to go more for ballads, more for slower songs. But I mean, it's everybody's got their own taste, you know. Okay, if there are no more follow-up questions.
If you and a ship and the ship had like a dance off somehow, who would win?
Oh, well, I'm sure the ship would win. I'm sentient, I'm strong, but I am not fast and I am not graceful.
Do you view the ship as your dancing partner?
That's I mean, I don't feel it. I don't feel like our relationship is dancers. I feel like it's conversation. It's, if I had to choose a metaphor. Okay. Moving on to the next question.
The ship's physical avatar has diverged in personality from the ship. What made you realize?
And also, feel free to define what the ship's physical avatar is.
Oh, I will. So I think it was, well, we were in one of those, sort of tricky maneuver situations. The ship has a tendency when we sort of tell it what to do, and try and force a little of our will on it, to sort of to manifest itself in uh, these sort of ethereal forms. They look uh, like like crew members, but their costuming is from an older time, and it's a little disconcerting to the newer crew members when it happens. But they actively give out orders that would sort of impede what we are trying to do. So if we're trying to steer away from some tower and the ship wants to you know ram right into it, there will be suddenly this sort of this bowsman will sort of appear next to and shout out, "No, straight ahead!" And it's very confusing when it happens. But if you're in the helms room and you're there while the pilot is having the conversation, the ship is agreeing. And these ethereal sailors that appear are actively fighting against what even the ship has agreed to. It gets really confusing.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like there's a self-destructive side to the ship if it's shouting at you to steer into obstacles. Is that your impression?
And it's almost a coin flip, because half the time those ethereal sailors are, in hindsight, they're shouting the right things. And it would have been smarter to do what they had said.
Between the sailors and the ship itself, which one tends to be thought of as the real personality?
I think to some of the more low-ranking deckhands, they view the ship by the ethereal sailors when they appear. It's really their main interaction with the ship. But for upper crew members who spend a lot of time in conversation with the ship, either in the engineering or up atop of the balloon, or who spend a lot of time in the helm, they feel that they have a true connection to the ship.
If there are no more follow-up questions, I'll move on to next player.
Your people built this ship with a purpose in mind. How has the ship betrayed that purpose? I believe that the Widow Jones is not, I'm going to answer this a bit complex, I guess, but the Widow Jones is not a widow so much in the form of missing a husband, but she is the oldest human ship crew member, and she's a widow to the ship's old purpose, which I think it was originally just a ferry. Like, we just took people from destination to destination, and that was, the ship has betrayed that purpose because it is like a Serenity or like any other ship with lots of hidey holes. It is great for smuggling things. And I think the ship has this attitude that sometimes the people some people just didn't need everything they came onto the ship with, and some of the crew members needed it more.
I gotta ask, what are we smuggling so much of?
I think it depends on the season, but sometimes it may be spices that a certain town definitely needs to preserve their food. Sometimes it may be metals that will provide jobs to a smithing town. But I think it's pretty much like Robin Hood style things. We're smuggling, but for pure intentions.
Who of the ethereal sailors do you recognize?
Oh, that would be the tactician who was my father.
Why did a fairy need a tactician?
Well, the fact is, a fairy is going to be in some bad weather. You need to be able to see when the weather's coming, to know how to interact when the weather is going. I think he thought it was going to be a cushy job, but I mean, when the fairy's in a hurricane or tough winds, the tactician's desperately needed.
So, is it common or uncommon for a fairy to buy its freedom?
I think it's very uncommon.
And how do you feel about the current pilot?
Honestly, I'm a bit jealous, but relieved.
And why are you relieved?
Because I used to be the pilot, and I was running out of secrets.
Do you tell people about this? In particular, me?
Well, if you'd asked me directly, I guess I would, but no one's asked me directly yet.
I definitely haven't.
What does the ship still carry as a mark of its service as a ferry?
Oh, I believe that would be the sails. The sails have a insignia upon them that shows that this once was a ferry. It is a lot like the names of ex servants. You know, they like freemen or things of that nature. It's just a sign that it has advanced beyond what it was.
And how do the rest of your people feel about it no longer being a ferry?
Honestly, I'm fine with it. I don't care what they think.
Are they who we're smuggling things from?
Ooh. Yes.
So, what is the name of the place where the ship was built? Its home?
Hmm. It is called the Phoenix, correct?
Yes, the ship is called the Phoenix.
I believe it was crafted at South Point.
And I imagine, is it? I imagine land travel from South Point is impractical because of the weather.
There's like a dry season which lasts 2 weeks if you're brave. Otherwise, yeah, very impractical.
So, yeah, so ferries are quite important. Okay. Any more follow-up questions? All right, let's move on to Pearl.
What was the last time the ship refused to follow your instructions and what disaster resulted? That's convenient, because I'm Doyle Daringdo, and I am one of the ethereal sailors that has been mentioned previously. But while all of the others are busy yelling commands all the time, which I have figured out was not an effective way of getting things done, I have been spending time learning to become corporeal for short periods of time so as to interact with other people. So the last time the ship refused to follow our instructions, it was us saying, turn around, maybe don't go into that nebula. In fact, definitely don't go into that nebula. It seems like the last thing we want to do is to go into that nebula. And then we went into the nebula, and the disaster that resulted, well, there's a reason the ship had to be remade with a different purpose. It just wasn't the pleasant, scenic ride it might have been before as a ferry for others after the hull damage and weird alien spores embedded themselves in various parts of decks 2 through 19. It just, I guess this is probably not supposed to be a spaceship, but now it is, if it wasn't before, I think. Or else there was a nebula in the ocean.
Yeah, I'm
Weirder.
assuming this was an ocean nebula.
Yeah. So there were some weird things in the ocean, and we called them a nebula because we had not come across that phenomenon before, and that's what they most resembled. It was probably a lot of jellyfish, but they were very powerful jellyfish.
Right. Well, so I mean, it's sky jellyfish because we do fly through the sky, even though we are a ship.
This is a very confusing ship for someone as tired as I am. But okay. In any case, it did not turn around because the colors in the nebula were so pretty. And as we've established, it likes nice things like dancing and like conversation, and it also likes pretty things. And so it wanted to go check them out. And it just didn't work out. Well, like I said, there's a reason it's not a fairy, and my comrades and I are now ethereal forms that shout contradictory commands at everyone. It really didn't work out well for anyone, I would say.
I was going to ask, is this the incident that resulted in your becoming ethereal?
Yeah, all of us. Literally all of us who were on board that day. That's why there are so many of us yelling.
Well, I mean, not Jack. Of course, Jack Slade, of course. He was a golem, was not completely unaffected.
Well, right, but I mean, of the people.
Oh, what you're saying? I'm not a person. You're saying I'm not a person.
No, you're a golem, but that's not bad. I'm Jewish. I think golems are great.
Do you still
Have
see
you
the
met my
nebula?
golem, Chaim? He's great. Anyway, different game. Sorry, go ahead.
Do you still see the nebula?
I mean, in my mind's eye, or like on the horizon, or
Either one.
yeah, I think we all have been pretty clear on steering clear of that kind of phenomenon since then, after what happened. But I still remember it because I mean, the siren song of the nebula never really leaves you, I think there was a reason the ship resisted those orders, and we gave them reluctantly. And part of me always wishes I could go back, because there was this flash right before I became an ethereal being that yelled a lot, of just pure beauty, like color everywhere, and wonderfulness. So I can still see it. But if I saw it in real life, I would blindfold myself so I wouldn't be tempted to shout a command in my louder than my compatriots way, since I can become corporeal occasionally. It would lead us astray.
And just to clarify, would the Widow Jones have been on the ship at the time of this disaster, if the Widow Jones is the oldest current crew member, or would this have come after?
I think maybe the Widow Jones, and clarify for me if this is not correct, was just not on that particular trip.
I believe the Widow Jones was helping signing the freedom forms for the Phoenix at that time.
And lucky her.
Yes, and I do have a question. Do you think the current etherealness of our, let us say, flesh and blood-based compatriots at the time were caused by these odd nebula jellyfish, or that maybe their venom is what's keeping you tied to the ship? Or is the ship not wanting to let you go?
If I knew that, I could probably act on it in some way. It's taken me all these years just to figure out how to go corporeal for more than like 5 minutes at a time. But I do feel bound to the ship. But I can't tell if that's the ship pulling me in, or just sort of the nature of having died traumatically somewhere that you get bound to that spot. I've heard that happens to like spirity things, or just that I like the ship. Maybe I just don't want to leave. Where am I going to go? I'm like a mostly incorporeal being, right? So it's hard to say. But I do like it here. And I feel like I wouldn't be at home elsewhere.
Yeah, and the ship is now on its voyage to the scrapyard. So, what are your plans?
Well,
Do you have any hope of escaping the ship?
I mean, I don't know if I'm trapped here or not, so I have at least hope. But I know the captain's supposed to go down with the ship, but I feel like when that rule was written, they weren't really keeping non-corporeal beings in mind. So maybe it's the captain and ethereal forms go down with the ship. We'll have to see when the time comes. But if so, it's been a good run. I mean, that incident was a long time ago now. And if it's my time to go, maybe it's my time to go, Sing one more jolly sea chanty of the air. You know how it is.
Are your sea shanties dance-like, or are they more like ballads?
Oh, we've got a great mix. I mean, we've had a very long time now to write them. So, sorry for saying that. The original ones and the new ones, but I think we like to have a good mix. We've established that the ship enjoys all kinds of things, but I think it's easy to sort of adapt actual sea chanties to air sea chanties and other things, because air streams are kind of like tides. So there are a lot of things you can pull in and out. And after all these many years, we got bored with the originals for a while, so we like made up a new batch, and they weren't as good, but we sang them anyway and pretended. And now we're kind of like returning to the old ones. The hope is that, you know, if I can get enough of my companions to stop shouting the contradictory commands all the time and like maybe make a chorus, we could teach everybody on the ship the songs, and then as we go in for you know, the end of the line, we could all sing together as a tribute to the ship and all her beauty.
All right. How about we take a 5 minute break here, come back at five past the hour. All right, I'm going to pause the recording. All right, we're back, and the next question.
All right. It says, when was the last time you saw the ship frightened? I think it would be when it got the news that it was being decommissioned and off to the scrapyard. The ship never really thought about that. The idea of it being not really immortal in the way that we think of it, but in the way of it could ever possibly not exist in the way that we think of existence. Never thought of it really before. And so yeah, the day that it got the news that you've kind of reached the, well, as the name of the game is, the end of the line, I would say that's probably the time when it became the most scary that I've ever seen it.
We actually established that the ship had bought its freedom. So what was the authority that decided that the ship had to be scrapped?
I think whatever the nexus of power, you know, that keeps the ship afloat, whatever that nexus of power was, had begun to degrade. And it became so irreparably degraded, you know, just because that's the nature of things and the way that things age, that it eventually came out after quite a lot of examination that sooner or later this ship isn't going to be even safe to be on anymore. It's just going to drop out of the sky one of these days if you're not careful. And so it wasn't necessarily an exterior authority that said you must get rid of this ship, but maybe it was almost like the ship's own decision. Said, look, it's better for you guys if we do it this way.
Right. I mean, this is an aerial ship. Can the ship even land? Could it be grounded?
Perhaps in the water. I could see it coming to kind of a smooth water landing and sort of converting into a naval vessel in some way, but I mean, all that's ever really known is the air, and even when it's in the water, movement. So the idea of not moving, of being still in some way, is really, really tough for it to come to terms with.
I think we've established that the ship, that at least the Widow Jones can no longer pilot the ship because she has run out of secrets to tell it. Is the ship run on secrets? Is that the power source? Is that what feeds the power source?
I like that idea a lot. I would like to say yes, just it's hard for me to kind of reconcile that idea with the nexus degrading, because then in theory it would never run out of secrets.
Or does
Maybe
the
the
ship
nexus-
know all the secrets that it needs to know?
Well, maybe, or perhaps it runs off of secrets it's never heard before. And by this point, it feels like it's kind of heard it all, seen it all, and there's just not a whole lot left in reserve there, perhaps.
It could be, if I may, maybe the Nexus can no longer keep secrets, and once they're no longer secrets, they don't power it.
Well, that could have something to do with why people keep overhearing everything I tell the ship, wouldn't it?
What other secrets has the ship leaked to you?
Oh, to me? Oh my goodness. What hasn't it? It never really wanted to be a ferry. It was made for that purpose, but that's never really what it wanted to be. It always wanted to be a warship. And it never really got the chance, but it got to kind of play at it every now and again. Maybe that's why it kind of took us into some daring and dangerous situations, even though it wasn't the most strategically advantageous move. It wanted to kind of play at making things a little bit more dangerous, a little bit less pedestrian.
Was the ship being frightened a secret of the ships?
Like, did it keep it a secret that it was frightened? I don't think so, because the ship has had a lot of flaws, and it's had a lot of kind of little personality quirks that have flared up and made life complicated for its crew members along the way. But I think one of the things that the ship has always stayed true to is having trust in us. It has always had the willingness to be vulnerable. Doesn't mean it's going to share all of its secrets just without being prompted to do so. But I think that it would be willing to tell us how it feels about its impending dismantling or scrapping. Someone asked, maybe it was me, and it was willing to tell us, probably in a very somber yet uneasy tone.
I think that's the thing about all of you who haven't been on quite as long. We ethereal beings, and I apologize that you can't see me. I couldn't keep up the corporeal form quite long enough here, but you can tell just by looking at the ship. You don't need to ask. You know, is it looking, well, ship shape's a bit too on the nose, but I think you can tell how the ship feels if you really tune in. You know, are the screws as tightened as they need to be? Are any blinds that are up full and billowy? I think that we've lost touch with just feeling the ship without words.
Yeah, I imagine that it's really a little bit like riding a horse almost. You know, you can kind of get a vibe for where the horse's headspace is, even though the horse hopefully isn't talking to you. But, you know, you can steer it a little bit and it'll maybe lurch a little differently, or it'll be a little bit more hesitant to go one way or the other. I could totally see that being the case for this ship too.
Has the ship ever told you a secret that it told you not to tell me?
Hmm.
And I'm fine with this just being a yes or no answer.
Yes. Can I offer a possible kind of a possible example of what the secret was?
You can answer
I'm
the
thinking
question
that the
however
ship,
you like.
yeah. Well, I'm thinking that the ship wishes that the Widow Jones was on it on the day of that calamity, because that way the Widow Jones would become ethereal, and that way the Widow Jones could be with the ship forever.
If there are no more questions, I'll move on. I tried to bring on a new crew member and the ship rejected them. Why will I never forgive the ship for this? I think that I tried to. It was another magical creature. It was actually a genie that had been freed from its obligation to serve a master. I mean, it lost its magic, and but it was no longer bound to anybody, and it needed some place to live. And I thought it could be part of the crew, but the ship just had this incredible antipathy towards them, and it would just flat out, it would not let the genie on board the ship. And so, I mean, the genie was it had to stay in South Point, and I mean, I think the genie eventually starved to death. It was not able to survive as a mortal being, and I think the ship could have saved it. Could have saved him.
Do you think it was a jealousy thing? Like, I mean, I have never gotten the sense that the ship felt badly about the crew or what it does, but maybe seeing an example of another being that had been tied to servitude in, albeit a very different way.
I mean, I don't understand the antipathy at all. It's like it doesn't see any difference between a golem and a person, but it sees a difference between a person that was born human and a person that was originally a magical creature and became human.
Who was this genie to you?
Well, the genie, it originally belonged to, the genie was the one who originally animated me. I mean, my master had been the genie's master for some time, and that after the master died, the genie passed to his son, and I was at that point when the master had died, I was no longer bound to anybody, but the genie was still bound to the family. And then when the son was dying, he actually used his last wish to tell the genie, be free, be human.
So the genie was no longer magical?
Right, because a genie can't use its powers of its own free will. It can only use its powers at someone else's direction. So in order for a genie to become free, it has to lose its powers.
Okay.
What did you do for this family?
I was my master called me he called me his servant. He sometimes treated me as a valet, but I think mostly I existed to impress people with his power. It's like, look how awesome I am. I have a golem as my servant.
If you were there to impress people, what were you animated from?
Well, from from a statue. It's like just this old statue that my master my master found in some dusty warehouse. I mean, he went inquiring for a statue, and eventually someone dug me up out of some warehouse, and it's like no idea who I'm a likeness of. Just some generic figure sculpted in gray stone. Not It's not even slate. That's just my name. I think my master didn't know anything about geology, mineralogy. He thought I looked like slate, so he called me Slate. So shall I move on to the next card?
Is that a repeat?
Yeah, that's a repeat. I'm not sure. I misread. Here we. All right. You're muted.
Hey, all right. When was the last time the ship cost you something important? Well, as the galley cook, um, you know, I think the ship, when it decided to no longer be a ferry and go off on all of these adventures, it really didn't think or take into account the livelihood of some of its longer serving crew members. And I think ultimately the ship, it cost me my family, where the ferry job was reliable. I was home every night. Now I'm off on these adventures. I don't know when I'll be home. And eventually, I return and the kids had aged several years. They no longer want anything to do with me.
Is it worth it?
Some days more than others.
When you are at home around your kids, have you made any like significant attempts to like bridge the gaps that have been made by your extended absences? And if so, what were they and how were they received at the time?
I always bring them gifts from far off places. Sometimes I bring them things that you're not allowed to have in South Point. But they like dancing on the ship. When the ship is in port, I bring them to the dances, and occasionally, when I'm cooking, and for these these parties on the ship, uh, the ship will whisper to me things that my kids won't tell me. That's actually how I keep up with them. As long as I know that their secrets are minor things, then I know that they're safe.
Are you looking forward to the ship being decommissioned?
Yes.
Has anyone has anyone on the ship, or maybe even the ship itself on some level, whether you like it or not, has anyone kind of become like a second family to you?
Uh, you know, I think Jack takes it wrong sometimes. But I can always rely on Jack to get the work done. And I think Jack can rely on me to, you know, patch him up when he needs it.
Who else on the, well, ethereal or otherwise, who do your family prefer on the ship rather than you?
I think my oldest, she actually prefers the ethereal sailors. Um, and I think she likes to flirt with them. I think she finds it amusing, and I think they enjoy it. Um, and I think it's my youngest, uh, and I think he likes to spend time in the helm room with the pilot. I think I hear more of his secrets than I hear of hers, but
All right, let's move on to Ferret.
What brings out the ship's nurturing urges? No matter how drastic the commands may be that we have to choose between, and no matter how we skirt danger, the ship is always there afterwards. The more dangerous the mission, the more conflicted the outside world is, the more nurturing the inside of the ship gets.
How does it express that?
I think the ship loves music, but it expresses that by singing to the crew, and like whatever songs would be most calming or reassuring to someone, we get at the perfect time. Like if it'd be a lullaby when going to bed, or a sea shanty when going to the galley cook's place.
and what song does it sing to you, Widow Jones?
The song it sings to Widow Jones is the South Point Bridal March.
Why is that one so important to you?
Because I am a widow of my last life. I left the woman I was supposed to marry for this ship, and the ship will always remember my sacrifice.
Has the ship made any sacrifices for you?
Too many for me to keep track of, but the most important ones are the ones that the ship and I keep between ourselves. If you know of any, I don't know you know them.
What was the last dangerous occasion that the ship sang the song to you?
I believe when I was checking the storage area of our latest smuggling operations, it sang with me and made me dance, so I would not leave when the traitor to us was outside. I mean, they walked the plank afterwards, but better they didn't see anything that they shouldn't have seen.
All right, I move on to Pearl.
What brings out the ship's rage? Ooh. Trying to decide whether I want to pass on that one or not. I think I'm actually going to pass that one.
Okay, David, did you want to answer that?
It's a fine question. What brings out the ship's rage?
I mean, you can also pass the question if you want, and if it goes all the way around the table with no one answering, then we just throw it out.
Got it. I have an idea, but I think the questions I would ask are better than the answer I could provide, so I'll pass.
Okay, that brings it to me. I mean, I think what brings out the ship's rage, I think it's when someone tries to threaten the crew. It's the ship. It's normally fairly easy going, but it will protect its crew.
How did it protect you?
I think the council in South Point, they actually, after I had been on the ship for a while, somebody started a lawsuit trying to say that I should be the property of the city instead of a free golem, and the ship actually stayed away from South Point for 8 months while the until the lawsuit was dropped. And I mean, it was actually talking about getting cannons put on and storming the city.
Does the ship intervene if there is a problem between two crewmates?
That's, I mean, the ship gets really unhappy when there's a problem between two crewmates, and it's like that makes everybody on the ship miserable. So people tend to try to intervene in that situation to resolve the, or at least make the ship think the problem has been resolved. I mean, a lot of the time, if there are two people on the ship who just do not get along, one of them, the 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 most of the crew will get together and tell one of them, look, next port you're getting off and you are not coming back.
So how did you talk the ship down from strapping itself with cannons and storming the city?
Well, mostly it's like we sort of we raised some rational objections, and it's like, well, whenever the ship tried to talk to anybody from off the ship and say that it wanted to do this, we would catch them after they left the ship and said, no, don't do this, just stall the ship, we'll talk them down. And it's like most people are kind of reluctant to arm sentient ships. It's we do actually have some small guns to defend ourselves from pirates, but not actual like cannons that could batter down walls. No, we've got some small arms for self defense, but nothing that could. We are not a warship.
It kind of sounds to me like, in a different way from how I might be, that you're kind of bound to the ship. What's your plan for the coming days?
I'm not actually bound to the ship the way the ethereal sailors are. I mean, I'm enchanted, but it's completely separate from the ship's enchantment. So I mean, I can leave the ship as easily as any of the other ship's crew.
Right, but where do you plan to go? I
Where
mean,
do I
it
plan?
sounds like the
Right.
ship
Well,
has your back and accepts you for who you are.
yeah. I mean, I don't think I would. I don't think I want to settle down in South Point, but there's a port forest home. I was thinking of getting a cottage there. I've got some money. I've got some money saved up, and it's it's actually very beautiful.
Do you think you'll miss the ship?
I know I'll miss the ship.
Are you
It's,
going to bring anything with you?
I mean, there's a part of the ship that's like there's a chamber where it's like the center of the ship's enchantment, and I they they say that you can't separate the the ship, the entity, from the ship, the physical thing. But I am going to try. I am going to try to take a piece of the central enchantment, and I mean, maybe I can save the ship. I don't know, but I think it's worth trying.
Have you communicated to the ship about this potential plan?
I think I discussed it with the ship, but the ship thinks that it can't be done, and it was telling me not even to try. So I've talked about it with a couple of the crew members when we're off the ship and where the ship can't hear. I mean, I think I'm going to try to do it anyway, but the ship has told me not to do it.
So you're willing to betray the ship's sort of wishes for its own, like, I don't know if it's ending on its own terms, but you're willing to go against the ship's wishes for itself in an attempt to save it. Do you think that the ship will ultimately thank you for having done that if you are successful? Or do you think the ship will be angry that you did not follow its wishes?
I mean, I don't know. I just think that it's worth trying. And if the ship, if the ship is alive and it hates me or it no longer trusts me, I would still rather that the ship be alive.
Understandable.
I mean, I think deep down, I'm not really convinced that I can succeed. I think the ship is probably right that it's futile, but I feel like it's better to have some hope, even if I know that it's a ridiculous hope, than to just.
Well, and if it is futile, you're not losing anything by trying, right? If it was never
Right.
going to work anyway, it's not going to
Right.
work even less than not when you try it. So I think that, you know.
I mean, I hope so. I mean, it's possible that the ship will end up suffering.
Good to keep in mind. I hit the wrong button. No. Okay.
Greg, you're muted.
Sorry. Do we go back for the next card?
Yeah, I was going
Okay.
to skip back to Pearl and then go to David and then skip over me. So if there are no more follow-up questions, I'll go back to Pearl.
I do not know the turn order at all, so just tell me when the card is there and I will look.
No, you're muted.
I'm muted. Yeah. I'm just saying. I was just X-carding the card I drew because it was, has the ship asked you for help to avoid being scrapped, and I feel like that's redundant with what I was just saying. So
Right.
I am going to draw another card. Oh, and I think this one, I need to. I may need to X card. We may need to X card this one as well because it's. I mean, Pearl. Do you think you can make that one work, or should?
It's kind of confusing with my backstory up to this point. I can pass it if someone else wants to take it, but I was kind of imagining that I had only ever been on the ship until I stopped
this
being
is
alive.
the question. You used to crew the scrapper vessel you were going to meet. That's just X card this as well. That's get.
Like if I did, it would have been a really long time ago at this point.
Right.
So okay. How did I disappoint the ship on this journey? On this journey, meaning like the journey we are on currently to the scrapper?
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't have to be like directly to the scrapper, but very recently.
Okay. Hold on, I'm going to try to focus my energies here, see if I can become visible for a second. I think it works. I don't know how long I can keep it up, but it saddens me to admit it, because I did not think she would be disappointed. But in a similar vein to what Jack was saying, but slightly differently, I thought we could just not take her to the scrapper. I thought we could just run her off into the sky somewhere, find another nebula, and let that be what took us out, if anything. The ship sings songs when we're sad, and I sang one of the songs back, and I said, why don't we go out singing? And, I had a whole speech. I've had a long time to think about this kind of thing, amidst all the hullabaloo. And I reminded her that, in the immortal words of Jack Sparrow, that a ship is freedom, and that we should go where we wanted. And I didn't realize that she wanted to accept her fate gracefully. That's why she, I think, also argued with Jack. It's not necessarily that she's ready to go to the scrapper, but she has recognized that that is the fate that's been set up for her. And she chose, after an initial period of, anger and mourning and whatever else, that she wanted to go out with dignity and grace. And she has felt that all of these attempts to undermine the plans are robbing her, or not even necessarily robbing her, but if she rose to them, they would rob her of that moment of just sort of acquiescing to fate, having one final voyage and making it as beautiful as she could. And she was disappointed that I wouldn't be able to intuit that about her after all these years, and I'm disappointed in me too. I think I was blinded by how much I care about the ship, and I should have known that that she would go out on her own terms, not on mine, not on Jack's, not on anyone's, right? She can care for the crew and what happens to us, but ultimately she also is her own being, and it's not up to us to save a scrap of her here or there, or to try to sneak off into the night like a criminal, She just wants us to accept it with her.
So are you going to try to stop Jack from carrying out his plan?
I think what I learned from this whole thing was that the ship doesn't need us acting for her. And so no, I don't think I will. I think she would do it herself. I'm going to leave it to her. It's the one thing I've learned the most. Leave it to her to handle her affairs.
Do you think her avatar agrees with this, since they seem to be divided on so many issues?
I don't know. I pretty much just communicate with the ship on a level that perhaps is difficult for people who have constant corporeal forms. But being able to sort of go in between the corporeal world and the ether, I feel like I communicate mostly with the essence of the ship. And I'm not that concerned with the rest of it. least not now. Too many years of squabbling and worrying. I mean, you hear my former companions. They're still yelling back and forth all the time. And where's that getting any of us, right? We're headed to the scrapyard. None of those shouted things have that was not what I meant to do, sorry. Have, like, none of them have made it a peaceful voyage. Why can't we all sing together? Why can't we all have one last hurrah? Whatever the Avatar wants, it should just join in.
I get the impression that the ship has done a somewhat admirable job of accepting its impending fate. Have you accepted its impending fate?
I don't really have a choice. You know, like I said, the ship has accepted it and wants us to accept it. And so what is the most respectful thing you can do for someone you care about, right? It's to respect their own wishes for their being. Even if those things would hurt you, even if those aren't the choices you would make. So, have I accepted it? Yes, because I want what the ship wants for itself. Am I happy about it? No. Can I really imagine life without the ship? No. Do I have any idea what I'm going to do? No. But sometimes you just have to let go when it's the right thing to do, you know? I think my corporeal form might be fading out. But you can keep asking me questions. I'll just have to answer you in a more spooky way.
Do you see the nebula clearer now than you have before?
Do I see the nebula clearer now than I do? Well, it was never unclear. When you go through something that sublime, it imprints itself on your soul. And even if it destroys you in the process, it changes you. And I don't think any of us, even my vociferous companions in all of their nonsense, I don't think any of us ever stopped seeing that nebula clearly. It was sort of the defining point of our existence. But I do sometimes hope, and hopes are foolish things for the life of a sailor. You know, we have rough lives, and the sea and the sky are harsh mistresses, and they don't always do what you expect, and they don't always give you what you hope for. So you go in knowing that, and you try to keep those hopes to a minimum. And yet, there's a part of me that imagines that after the scrapyard, especially if I'm tied to the ship, which everything we know says that I probably am, which means when she goes, I go, that somehow we find ourselves back in that nebula together. And instead of destroying us this time, we can just live in the color.
All right, if there are no more questions, then let's take another 5-minute break and come back on the hour. And I will pause the recording. All right, and the next card goes to David.
There is a place where the ship's internal perception does not reach. What do you do there? Okay. Yeah, I just have to give a quick shout out to the Widow Jones for the answer of meth. That is excellent. Okay. So let me see here. All right. What do I do in this place where the ship's internal perception does not reach? I think that I think that what I basically do is write letters to nobody. The situation that the arrangement that the ship and I have together is that, you know, the ship is sort of my closest friend. Now I don't know that I'm the ship's closest friend, but the ship is certainly my closest friend. And I think that the thing that I always feel kind of torn about is having sort of inner thoughts that I'm not really able to convey to this ship for whatever reason. Could be any number of things. And so whenever I want to sort of get those feelings, get those thoughts, get those aspirations, get those things that I don't like about the ship, the things I don't like about the crew, the things I don't like about myself that I just can't really speak to anybody else, I imagine that I actually have this little hidey hole, because this is a smuggling ship, that I like to creep into, and I just stash all of these letters here. I don't sign them. I don't really, you know, put any identifying marks on them. But that's just kind of what I keep away, and I think there's a lot of guilt about that.
Yeah, I mean, could these secrets that you are keeping from the ship give the ship more, some of the power that it needs to last a little longer?
Yeah, and that's what's so guilt-provoking about it, is I feel like I could maybe save this ship, but my own just sort of inability to disclose these things to the ship is in its own way like kind of killing it. It's not like I'm actively destroying it, but I'm certainly preventing it from hanging on a little bit longer. And it's just this very internal conflicty kind of wrenching that occurs for sure.
When the galley cook found you, how did he know you harbored so many secrets and could keep the ship afloat?
I think the galley cook knows that this ship runs on secrets. And I think that I am so evasive about my past, my credentials, that kind of thing, that how else could the ship be running if not for this guy who never tells anyone anything? It's kind of interesting. There's this dynamic here where on the one hand, I could be real connected to you guys and could be a very social sort of butterfly with the rest of the crew. And on the other hand, I got to keep all this stuff to myself because that's the only thing keeping the ship afloat. But at the same time, by not disclosing myself to everybody else, it kind of renders my own internal life a bit of a mess. So it's this real seesaw back and forth kind of inner conflict.
Who are you more scared of finding these letters, the ship or one of the crew members?
The crew members, because I know the ship will always understand in the end. Like I said, the ship is this one trusting entity that I can rely on. And the rest of the crew, they're too human. Maybe just being with humans is the thing that's really threatening. Yeah.
What secret of mine that I haven't told the ship did you find in this place?
I think it might be that you also wish you were in that calamity. But perhaps You're not telling the ship because you wouldn't want the ship to think that you were self-destructive or didn't appreciate your life. And at the same time, the ship doesn't want to tell you that they want that thing too, because they don't want you to think that they wish harm on you. So you both want the same thing but can't tell each other.
Are these only really your secrets, or do you hear other people's secrets and write them down? Do you write down your secret, like, feelings about other people on the ship or ship's operations? Like, how much of it, if the crew were to see it, would feel personal to them?
I think most of it would feel really personal to the crew. In fact, I think that a lot of the secrets are about the crew and about the things I like and dislike about them. Whole problem is the ship absolutely hates it when there's conflict among the crew. So of course I can't tell anyone. It would do more harm than good, at least in my own mind. So I think that most of the secrets are those about my feelings about the crew members. I feel like I would still have some kind of human respect for the other crew members, and I wouldn't feed the ship their secrets. I would write them down just so that I could feel like I documented them somewhere and got them out in some way, but I don't think that I could value the ship above the sanctity of other people's privacy and the sanctity of other people's own secrets.
I haven't been down there personally, but do you think that the ethereal beings on the ship, who are probably not bound by walls and things, would have been able to get in?
Perhaps. I would say yes. And their makeup and their psychology and what they value, by nature of them being, by virtue of them being these cosmic, ethereal, eternal kind of beings, I could see a scenario in which they notice these secrets, but they view them as very transient. They view them as very temporary. They don't view them as particularly important. And so they wouldn't really be scandalized by it. I don't think they'd find it as some kind of incredibly juicy sort of gossip. I think that their sights are kind of set on something, beyond, this moment. They're always kind of looking forward to the next time they'll, kind of like what you said, to the next chance they'll have to see that color that you described.
That makes sense. I think they've been here long enough to have heard most kinds of secrets too. And what might have scandalized them long ago has become trivial.
Yeah.
Are there any about the ethereal beings? Either on the whole or any specific ones?
Yeah, I think it's a mix. It's a mix of very common day-to-day ones, like, man, these ethereal beings are really making my life difficult today, like basic stuff like that. And then I think there's the occasional time when my character would kind of be a little bit more wistful and muse a bit more about what it might be like to be one of those. And, what would it have been like if I had gotten on the ship X number of years before and I could have been one of them, Those kinds of questions that don't really have answers. They're just sort of ponderings. I guess this is all just a fancy way of saying that apparently I've stashed my diary somewhere on the ship.
It may just be a diary, but it's the diary that could keep the ship afloat.
It's a really important one. Yeah.
Withholding it.
Are these the secrets? Are these the secrets that you wouldn't want the ship to let loose once its nexus erodes?
No. I think that at the end of the day, I'm in kind of a rough place because this ship isn't long for the world, but I'm still here after it's decommissioned, even though it's kind of my one good friend at this point. but I'm going to have to find another ship to work on. It's all I know how to do. I'm going to have to find another crew to work with, and I can't have my reputation injured by the ship letting all this stuff loose. So I can either hide the secrets and tell no one. I can feed them to the ship to hope that it lives another day, even though that might hurt the ship's feelings. And between the two, it sounds like I'm going with the former. Not because I'm happy about it. I don't like that that's what I'm doing, but that's what I'm doing.
All right, moving on to Greg, skipping over me because I got that past question earlier.
This is a fun one. Why is your presence dangerous to the ship on this journey? My instinct is to go with, like, I want the ship to be destroyed, but the ship wants that too. I think I've made a deal. I've made a deal that where the ship is going to go be scrapped and removed from service. I have on the side made a deal to enrich myself, where the ship will be sold off, and although the ship will be destroyed, that this ancient core of secrets will be given over to the people of South Point. Yeah. And I'm holding that secret as close to the chest as I can on this thing. And I think that people are looking for that promise to come true a little bit sooner than the ship is anticipating being destroyed.
Yeah, so does the ship hold secrets that would be dangerous to the council in South Point or any particular faction on the council?
It's been around for so long that I think it's almost assumed by everyone on the council that yes, it does.
And is the assumption then that these secrets could in some way get out? Are they going to be recycled and used for other ships that also run on secrets? Is this what the whole darn fleet runs on?
I think so. And my apologies for the dog outside the door. I don't know if you can hear that. Okay. She's dramatic. Yeah. No, I think the people of South Point see that they can, if they can make a fleet of ships like this one, then they can really, whatever Byzantine sort of machinations the council is up to in South Point can come true.
And you would stand to benefit from this? Is it just in a monetary way, or is there something more to it? And either way, what does that say about you?
Oh, I'm sure it says terrible things, but I think it's a monetary compensation. It's my retirement because, the life of a smuggler is not one that's going to land you somewhere cushy.
I must ask, what would your daughter think of you?
She would think me a monster, but she already thinks that.
One can always be a bigger monster.
Is this a big risk on your part? I mean, you're leaking the secrets of a lot of people, probably some people who have some degree of power or influence. Is there any way this could be traced back to you? And if so, how are you accounting for that?
I'm not sure I've thought it through that far. I think
You could be pinning it on the ship, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, I think the sum outweighs. I anticipate being able to insulate myself with the amount of money that the council's going to give me.
So the money pays for the protection that you need.
Yeah, it should.
What's the one thing you don't want to have happen?
That's a really good question, and I want to have a really good answer for it. So give me 1 second. I don't want the ship to know that the deal I made was with the genie it wouldn't let on.
So the genie, I thought the genie starved to death, but you're telling me that the genie is actually on the council now?
Yes, in another form. They've promised me great wealth.
Oh no, you can't just say other form and not tell us what it is. It's preposterous.
I think the genie has disguised themselves as one of the long-serving members of the council, someone who's so timeless on it that it's easily faked.
So when Jack Slate thought that the genie was powerless, he was wrong.
Yes.
So, in this case, I just want to make sure that I'm not, inferring things that aren't correct. Is the genie the one who pushed to have the ship move towards the scrapyard? Was this like a revenge thing? Like, would it have happened anyway and you just sort of made a deal for profit, or were you and
I
the
think
genie
so.
sort of in on a scam? Not scam, but a plot.
I think the ship is trying to go on her own terms, so that because she knows that the core that drives her could be used for dangerous things, and I think the genie doesn't want that to happen, so he made a deal with me.
Seems like a shifty character.
Yeah. So was the genie planning this from the very, very beginning when they first tried to get on the ship to get control of? Yeah.
I don't know.
That's fair enough.
Sounds like the genie has some secrets of his own.
Secrets that may be contained within the ship.
No. hidey hole of some sort?
It seems like good time to move on to Ferret if nobody has any more questions.
What made you realize that the ship loves you? Was never in doubt. But I think it was the fact that the ship the ship kept one of those nebula jellyfish for me in its inside, so I could see it and not have been robbed of the nebula's beauty like everyone else. Well, not everyone else who wasn't on the ship at that time, I mean.
Does anyone else know you have that jellyfish?
I don't think I have it anymore. I think I saw it and I released it just to be safe.
Did that jellyfish go in the same direction as the scrapyard?
Yes.
Now, are these jellyfish intelligent? Is it possible that the jellyfish could know some things?
If they are, they're intelligent in a way I cannot translate or parse. I'm not sure if the ship can, though.
I mean, do you have any reason to believe that the ship might have communicated with these creatures or these entities before?
The only reason I think the ship may have communicated with them is because the secret of the ship that I know was that she was in love with my father and wanted to keep him on board for as long as possible.
And do you know that?
Yes, I know that. Though I think I begrudge her that she did not love me like that. Not that I know.
All right, I'm going to give one more question to Pearl, and then I'm going to draw one of the end cards.
Mute. Mute buttons are handy. I think I can manage physical form one last time. Might be a bit hazy though. You know, I get tired more every time I do it. So why the ship might does it trust me more than everyone else, right? Sorry, I'm bad at scrolling.
It's,
Trust my judgment the
yeah.
most. Yes. So I think it's because I've been here for so long, in part, but also because I did go through that nebula. And so, like, she's seen that. I mean, we don't have definitive proof of my being bonded to the ship, right? So, I've been with her ever since, right? Like, I went through this transformative experience and, lost my official life and whatnot. But never held it against her, right? We talked a little bit earlier about how it was the one time she had disobeyed orders, right? And it got sort of all of us killed in this nebula. But I've never held it against her because I can understand why she couldn't resist the beauty. And I think the fact that I have always been willing to say it was worth it and never blamed her is what has made her feel that she could trust me. Yeah, like she just knows that I will always be here and that I trust her to know what's best. Because even when she disobeyed us, it was like the most beautiful thing. Pablo.
It sounds as if, to me at least, that you have the utmost faith in the ship, and the ship kind of seems to have the utmost faith in you. Is there anything that could damage your trust in one another?
I don't think so. If there had been, I think it would have already happened by now. I think our relationship has stood the test of time. Like things that might have damaged it have come and gone. And while there may have been times of strain or awkwardness or whatever else, they they never lasted because the bond we have is bigger than any incident. I mean, the ship trades in secrets, right? Runs in secrets. So there have been plenty of chances, I think, for things to have gone awry. But ultimately, we're bound to each other not by some weird spiritual physics, but by a mutual sense of loyalty and love. And there aren't really any things that can break that. Doesn't mean we don't hurt each other sometimes.
Has the ship ever given you some sort of token or some sort of promise?
Not in so many words. I think when you're talking about a ship and an ethereal being, we don't communicate or make our bonds or any of that in the way that, say, humans would do. But what the ship has done is let me in to herself on a level that is so vulnerable. It's hard to explain if you haven't you haven't experienced it, but for example, if I want to soar and feel like I am flying and look around at the sky and the world, I can enter the bow at the very front of the ship, right? And look out without the rest. I don't even see the rest of the ship. I don't see the rest of the crew. It's like my view is her view. She shares that with me. If all the chatter and the noise of the other ethereal beings just starts to bother me too much, she lets me sink into her bulkheads or hide inside the anchor or whatever I need. She provides whatever she has. And I don't have that to give back to her, right? Like I can't let her come into my being. But when I do those things, she has complete access to my mind. It's like our minds just mesh into one. So I like to think that's the bond we've given each other, is one of such trust that our bodies and our minds are not closed off to each other. And we would allow each other to experience each other's everything with enough trust, which it takes a lot of trust to do those things. And yet there's never been a time when one of us decided to do so and we regretted it. It just brings us closer. Sorry, Pablo. I've offended the cat.
Right, and I am now going to draw one of the end cards. And coincidentally, when I drew the next random card, it was in fact one of the end cards. So we'll start with David, but everybody answers this question, going around in character keeper order.
All right, it says that the ship is ambushed. Do you defend it? Oh no. For my part, yes. I would like to say that it's out of altruism, the ship. At the end of the day, I don't know that I could go to sleep that night and think that that's what I was really doing. I don't think I'm actually defending the ship. I think that I'm defending my hidey hole of secrets. I'm trying to keep that from falling into enemy hands.
But you are literally defending the ship.
I am technically defending the ship. It appears that way, and yes, yeah, I am.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, and I think Jack Slade also defends the ship. He may not know what these raiders are after. He probably has no idea of all these manipulations involving the Southport Council or whatever reason anybody might have for attacking this ship. It's just the ship is under attack. He will defend it.
I think we've established that this is the nefarious genie's forces, and so my answer is no. No, I do not defend the ship. In fact, I might actively be trying to scuttle her in some way.
Of course, I defend the ship.
Yeah, I definitely defend the ship, but because it is not an easy thing for me to do, given how hard it is to become solid in the first place, what I actually do is I rally the rest of the ethereal beings, And for the first time, I finally managed to get through to them that squabbling and shouting out contradictory things is not helping. And I just get them all to shriek at the top of their lungs at the same time, but like standing as near to whoever's ambushing as possible. I don't know how many people have ambushed us, so maybe it's a crowd around each one, but not around the crew. The crew are going to hear it, because you're not going to not hear a bunch of ethereal beings shrieking at the top of their lungs, but to specifically aim it like at the faces and ears of whoever is invading. Just wordless shrieking that either will deafen them or scare them off, or at least provide enough of a what the hell is happening that other people can do more physical defending.
All
You
right.
love to mash me with your sharp claws. Yes, you do.
All right. Well, if our answers were all in agreement, we could have continued until we reached the other end card, which is the scrapyard. But since our answers are in disagreement, the game ends now, and presumably the ship is captured. It never reaches the scrapyard. So now, I mean, we could take some time to discuss the journey and its aftermath and sort of narrate a little epilogue for each of our characters.
Thanks a lot, Greg.
I think it. I definitely keeping this result. I think I sabotaged the ship by doing something nobody's ever dared to do, which is I've told the ship an inconvenient truth. Something the ship would actively wish to be a secret, something it would actively wish to be a lie, but it's a truth.
Traumatic knowledge can never be unheard.
And I'm curious what that would be. Maybe that they can never return to the nebula.
All right. Well, do we want to continue in character keeper order from Greg?
I have an idea, but I think
Okay.
I'd like to be the last, if that's okay.
All right. Pearl, do you want to go?
Sure. Well, Doyle is going to remain with the ship no matter what. So if it's been ambushed and not taken to the scrapyard, the most irritated he is just that her wishes weren't followed. But otherwise, his relationship with the ship doesn't change much. Like, he doesn't really care who's on it because he interacts almost entirely with her. But because she is now unhappy, he shares that unhappiness. And so he spends his days trying to think of the songs she used to sing and finding ways to lift her spirits.
David?
I think that I would be torn between two options. I would have option A, which would be to torch all the secrets that I've hidden in the ship. And, with the secrets, so go the ship. I think the thought would cross my mind, maybe if I just channeled all of these secrets into the ship at once, that would give it the boost it needs to get out of here. But I don't think I could bring myself to do it or try it. So I think that I would probably burn the hidey hole full of secrets in the confusion, defend the ship to the best of my ability. But if the battle is lost, then there's nothing else I can do. So then I would have to either surrender or escape in some way. Not a heroic way out, but it's what I can see happening.
Yeah, and I think Jack he's grabbing the like a belaying pin or whatever it is that people fight with when fighting off pirates, and he is on the deck of the ship fighting off the boarders until he is overwhelmed, and he is actually the invaders actually managed to throw him off the ship, and he falls onto the ground below and is completely shattered. He dies in defense of the ship.
And the final thing, I think it's me, right? Since
Yes.
I will let the ship know my final secret, that I knew I was never getting out of this alive. And I think with that last secret, and I take my helm at the pilot's seat, and since I see, I know, let me check to make sure it's not a line or veil. Okay, but then I give the ship its final wish. It is a war vessel in this last method, and we ram the genie's ship. No one will take these secrets from us.
The secrets were all in that cubby hole anyways.
Yeah, all right. And that is end of the line. I will stop the recording now, but if you want to stick around for debriefing, feedback, anything, please do.